Sometimes, they begin with a place no one thinks to question. A remote farm outside Montana. Quiet land, long fences, very few visitors. For years, women entered that property quietly, and many were never seen again. At the center of that land was a man named Daniel Carter. He lived alone for long periods, avoided attention, and rarely built lasting relationships. To most people, Daniel appeared socially awkward, withdrawn, and easy to overlook. Nothing about him suggested the kind of investigation his name would eventually trigger. But in 1983, after the death of a close family member, Daniel inherited full control of the farm. That moment changed everything. For the first time in his life, he had complete freedom, no supervision, no restrictions, and no one paying close attention to what happened beyond those fences. He moved into a trailer set deeper inside the property, away from the main road, and began bringing women there under ordinary excuses. Sometimes he offered money for small jobs. Sometimes he offered temporary work. Sometimes he offered help that sounded harmless enough to trust. At first, there was nothing that seemed unusual, but over time, that pattern became darker. Daniel struggled socially. His behavior often made people uncomfortable, and genuine relationships rarely lasted. So instead, he began paying women from nearby town centers for company. Over time, he became familiar in places where vulnerable women often waited for quick cash. Then, in 1996, investigators believe the violence began. One woman entered that farm and never returned. Then another, and then another. At first, no one connected the disappearances. The property remained quiet, and Daniel remained unnoticed. Then money entered the picture, and with it the perfect cover. In 2001, Daniel sold part of the farm and received a large payment. Instead of leaving the property behind, he expanded it. An old slaughter building on the land was converted into a private event space. What began as occasional gatherings quickly became large late-night parties. Music, alcohol, unfamiliar vehicles, and constant movement through the property made the farm busier than it had ever been. Some nights, hundreds of people arrived. Strangers came and left without anyone asking questions. And inside that chaos, Daniel found exactly what he needed: cover. Because when people arrived in large numbers, no one noticed who failed to leave. Women were brought to the property under ordinary promises, money, temporary work, or private arrangements. Some entered the trailer near the back of the land. Some were last seen walking toward the farm buildings. And after that, they disappeared. Investigators would later believe that several victims were killed there over multiple years while daily activity on the property continued as if nothing had happened. Then, in 2002, one woman survived. Her name in court records would later become one of the most important moments in the case. She had agreed to go with Daniel after being promised payment. At first, nothing seemed unusual, but once inside the trailer, the situation changed. When she asked to leave, Daniel refused. When she demanded payment, he became aggressive. A struggle followed. She fought back. During that confrontation, she managed to injure him and force an opening long enough to escape. Wounded, she reached medical help and gave police a full statement. For the first time, authorities had a direct accusation tied to Daniel. He was arrested, and for a moment, it appeared the case had finally reached a turning point. But it did not hold. Months later, prosecutors dropped the attempted murder case. I need to pause here. Stay with me. If cases like this matter to you, real stories where one legal decision changed everything,
Subscribe now to Shattered and Served. And while you're at it, comment below. Tell us what you would have done if you were in her shoes and where you're watching from. We want to hear your perspective from all around the world. Questions were raised about witness reliability. The case collapsed before trial, and Daniel walked free. That decision would later become one of the most disturbing legal failures connected to the investigation. Because after that release, more women disappeared. For Daniel, freedom became confidence. He believed the system had already looked at him and failed to stop him. The farm remained active, the parties continued, and over the next several years, investigators believe more victims entered that property without leaving. What eventually ended it was not a missing person breakthrough. It was something far smaller.
In 2007, a man who knew Daniel reported illegal firearms stored on the property. The report seemed minor. Police arrived expecting to search for weapons. Instead, they noticed personal belongings that did not belong there. Identification cards, medication, objects connected to women already listed as missing. That changed everything. A second search followed, then a broader forensic search. This time, investigators uncovered biological evidence across multiple areas of the farm. Human remains, DNA traces, fragments that confirmed the pattern investigators had failed to stop years earlier. Daniel Carter was arrested again. This time, the evidence did not leave room for doubt. The investigation expanded into one of the largest criminal searches tied to private land in the region. In court, prosecutors presented evidence linking him to dozens of victims. He was ultimately convicted and sentenced to life imprisonment. But even after conviction, the case continued to haunt those who followed it. Because one fact remained impossible to ignore. Years earlier, one woman had escaped, and the system had still allowed him to walk free. In 2025, while serving his sentence, Daniel was attacked inside prison during a violent confrontation with another inmate. He later died from those injuries. For some, that moment closed the case. But for many families, justice had arrived far too late. This is Nathan Mercer, and this case reminds us that sometimes justice is delayed not because the truth was hidden, but because the warning came too early for the system to act. You're watching Shattered and Served, where real cases reveal what should never have been ignored. Comment below your thoughts on this case and where you're watching from. Like, share, and subscribe to see more stories that hold the system accountable.